producer is based on a negative critique of the university structure. The modern university is fundamentally dysfunctional. Teaching and research work against each themselves. That's not just me who's saying it. There's a lot of academic research about that. There was a big commission in the US in the 1990s called the Reinvention Committee for Ivy League universities. That's where the Reinvention Journal gets its name from. This is a real problem. We know it, we live it every day in our working lives. So is it possible to promote the re-engineering of the relationship between teaching and research, to re-engineer, to reconnect those two activities, to reinvent the university as a new social institutional form, actually to reinvent the university as the university? When we talk about this, we go back to the radical history of the modern university, with reference to Wilhelm von Humboldt's University of Berlin in 1810 and the student protests of 1968. Remember, Humboldt's plan in 1810 was to recreate the university as a radical, political, liberal, humanist project, together with his group of German idealist philosophers. Humboldt's plan to establish the idea of the university as a political liberal humanist project as a basis of civilizing the population and building the emerging nation state. This would be done by connecting teaching and research in a program to promote the expansive creation of new knowledge. So the university becomes the highest level of consciousness of liberal society. A university is about the production of new knowledge. It's not about teaching and learning. That's school and colleges, and that's great. University is about the production of new knowledge and new meaning. And teaching and learning takes place as a part of that. The student protests of Paris in 1968 and around the world is a defining moment actually in the failure of the liberal humanist project, and when students and workers became the revealers of the general crisis of capitalist society. And this failure of liberal humanism, we know, was evidenced by imperialist wars, repression, anonymity of everyday life, and on and on and on. But an important part of this revelation by students was the demystification of the elite practice of the production of knowledge, with research becoming something that anyone can do. 68 was a very powerful moment in the democratizing of higher education. It was exported to the UK and around the world, and on curriculum development. The idea of the independent project was invented in this moment in North East London Polytechnic and Lancaster University as radical left-wing ideas and views. This, of course, has now been mainstream. But given the effect of 68 on university politics and the curriculum, what do we have to learn from the ongoing movement for student protest, the Occupy movement of student protest? What have we got to learn from student protest as academics? I'm arguing that we have much to learn. And in fact, teaching and learning and new technologies and how we use them form a central element of student occupations in UK universities, forming part of the wider movement. You might remember the Tent City University in St Paul's. Tent City University, a whole new university. I went down to give a talk, and my talk was, how do we reinvent higher education? And they said, well, we're already doing it. There's the Social Science Centre in Lincoln, there's other things going on elsewhere. And finally, in terms of intellectuality, the radicality of Students Producer is further underlined by its affinity with the writings of Walter Benjamin, notably author as producer. Walter Benjamin, as we know, was a Marxist, messianic, world-leading critical social theorist. And he wrote a paper, Author as Producer, in 1934. So Student Producer is ripped off that title, Author as Producer. You must read the article if you haven't already. And in the article, Walter Benjamin is addressing the question to the Society of Anti-Fascists in Paris in 1934. How do radical intellectuals act in a moment of crisis? That was his question. How do radical intellectuals act in a moment of crisis? Following Bertolt Brecht and the Russian constructivists, Benjamin's response was to enable students, or a part of his response was to enable students to see themselves as subjects rather than objects of history, as teachers, writers, and performers, rather than recipients of knowledge, and to be able to recognize themselves in a social world of their own design.